I'm excited to share this today, so I'm going to jump right in. But welcome back, everyone. My name's Alyssa, and I want to share what I'm learning about this because I feel like we all do this sometimes. So you've been hurt in the past, and you're struggling to trust yourself to meet new people, or you're just concerned about not making the same mistakes that you have before, or trusting the same kind of person that you have before, or whatever that looks like, whether it's friendship, romantic, whatever, right? Co-workers, whatever it is. This applies to anytime we've been betrayed and we're just concerned with not letting it happen again, who we let into our life. So if you want to practice just protecting your energy a little bit, protecting your space, and being a little bit more selective about who you let close to you, if that sounds appealing to you, as it should, this is what I've been learning, and I feel like I simplified it a little bit so that I don't keep this video too long, but really looking and watching how they are with other people around, like when you're with them and other people around, and how they are compared to when it's just the two of you. It seems small sometimes and subtle, but if you're honest with yourself and you really pay attention, if someone has the intent to not treat you the best, I think you will see a sign in that setup eventually. Maybe not right away. And like I said, they might be subtle. And you have to be, and the key part is you have to be honest with yourself, because it's not always what we want to admit. That's probably the hardest part about all of this work that we do when we're working on ourselves, and especially if we were to be talking about the romantic part of it. If you're romantically liking someone, it can be really difficult to admit when you see a red flag or a sign that something just is off a little. But I really encourage you to, take that step back, take that pause, and just really observe neutrally how they are when it's just the two of you, and then when there's other people around, and how they treat those other people too, and just how comfortable you are versus how uncomfortable you might be. And that can really be a tricky thing too, because sometimes we can misread our feelings or our intuition. And I know you ladies can definitely relate to that. We have very strong intuitions, but men have it too. We all have that kind of gut feeling, that knowing, that underlying sense, when something just is off or when we're uncomfortable. But the tricky part is that if we're used to those unhealthy patterns, or if we have an unhealthy attachment style ourselves, or that's just kind of what we're attracted to because that's what's familiar, it can be really difficult to tap into accurately read how you're feeling, right? Because if you're used to having that type of unhealthy pattern in your life, then that might feel comfortable to you, versus when you start to spend time with someone that is maybe a little bit more on the healthy side, right? That might feel strange to you. That might feel a little bit comfortable. So that is what I mean when I say it can get a little tricky, because sometimes you have to kind of stop and think and really kind of just analyze the situation a little bit deeper, and yourself and your feelings, and be honest about it. And that takes a lot of awareness, but that can be later down. Like I said, I've been really tapping into myself for a little while, so that's kind of where I'm at right now, as far as being able to distinguish when I'm feeling comfortable just because it's a familiar type of pattern or uncomfortability, or when it's actually more healthy and that it's a struggle. Actually, I'm working on it though. But really just to start, really just observing how they are. You know, are they consistent, kind of consistently the same type of personality? And there's always going to be some different, like we're all a little bit different, right? When we're more connected and close to just in an intimate setting with one person versus a crowd, there's always going to be like some normal differences. But I think you know what I mean when you really start to pay attention to it. There's a difference when you can kind of tell, you know, like for example, if they're always happy and smiley when it's you and a bunch of people, and then the second, you know, you guys are alone, they're cold and don't want anything to do with you, or, you know, all of a sudden angry, you know, like that's kind of, and that's happening consistently. And so when I talk about these things, I'm meaning a consistent pattern that you see, right? So you do have to kind of take the time to observe it over one, you know, multiple times. Like you don't want to just look at one isolated event necessarily and judge someone hardcore, right? Especially when you're first getting to know them. I do think that sometimes we just are going through stuff, or we're having an off day, and you know, we don't want to be like too harsh. So I mean, really observing this, you know, and you can see a pattern and this is consistently happening. I think that is something to really look into that can really help you later on in the long run, maybe avoid some pain if you can admit that and just be aware of it. Are they consistent? You know, are they kind to everyone? Or, you know, do they treat certain people in a certain way and then other certain people in a different way? And how's your body feeling when you're with them? And so another thing to really consider is just how do you feel when you're around them? Really tap into how comfortable you are, right? So you're observing and seeing the actual ways that they're acting, right? The way that they're communicating, but then it's also important, how do you feel? So that's back to when I was mentioning the intuition, right? We kind of know when something just feels off, and being honest about it and honoring that. How do you feel when you are with them? It's really going to make a difference, but it does take some honesty though, right? We don't always want to admit when we're really attracted to somebody and we're first meeting them that something just doesn't quite feel right. We don't always want to admit that. But that's why I said at the beginning, if you want to protect that energy, your space, and you don't want to make the same mistakes, I think that that's something to consider whenever you're meeting someone new. And even people that are already in your life, right? It's never a bad thing, because we grow and change. So it's never a bad thing to just kind of stop and take inventory of who's in your life and how they make you feel, and if it lifts you up or drains you, right? Those are kind of just good things to know. And you start spending more time and maybe put more energy into the people that you feel more uplifted by, right? If that's something that you value. Whatever your reasons are, that's totally fine, but just having them in alignment, right, I think can make a big difference. But I think a lot of times we overlook how we actually feel when we're with people, and I think that can be a huge mistake. You know, because our bodies are very intelligent, our nervous system is very intelligent, and our bodies, they're talking to us and they're communicating with us, and I think we ignore them a lot. And it bites us later, usually, in my experience. So this is what I've been practicing. This is what I was excited to share with you, because I think, you know, we're always talking about, you know, things to look for, but I simplified this into just a couple of small things to really pay attention to that I think are really two very important things, right? Consistency matters, and how people like trust when someone shows you who they are, right? Trust that. And that often comes out, and you can really easily observe it when you're comparing it to how they are with you when it's just you two and how they are when there's other people around. And then really just tapping into how your body reacts when you're with them and how you really feel, and listening to that underlying intuition. And I will say one more thing. We just know sometimes. So, you know, like when you're observing them, they just sometimes don't feel like they're there. They're there, but they're not really present with you. And you'll know what I mean when it happens. Like, if you don't know what I mean, you'll know what I mean when you experience it. Like, especially, I know us women, we can definitely pick up on that, but I think that is something that I've often ignored in my past. That was definitely something, if I could go back, I wish I hadn't. I'll just say that. But really, just when they're with you, are they present with you, right? And sometimes there's just like that, you can feel that underlying like emptiness, or just kind of, they're just not there, right? They're not, maybe they're not capable, or maybe they're distracted, right? And the reason might matter, right? That's why I said, you know, observe it for like patterns. You know, sometimes we just have one-off days, and that's all of us, and that's one thing. But really just observing it, right, over time. And if you're consistently feeling like when they're with you, like, yes, they're physically there, but they're not really there, right? They're not really there. They're not present with you. They're distracted, or they're acting like they're just miserable, or just going through the motions. And you know what I mean? And we ignore that sometimes, or we write that off, or we justify that. And I think that's a really important thing to pay attention to if you want to protect your space, protect your energy, and, you know, not be disappointed with the people that you let in your life moving forward. So I wanted to share that, because when I really sat down and thought about this topic, because I think it's just valid to all of us at some point, I wanted to narrow it down and make it kind of, you know, just a couple simple things to do. Because sometimes we put all of this stuff in our brains and we get a little overwhelmed and we don't really know where to start, but I feel like that's just kind of a good starting point. So I hope this helps. I hope this landed. Take what landed and run with that. You know, I believe that we hear what we're meant to hear at the time, right? So if some of this isn't landing, then that's okay. Take what did and just go from there. And maybe later, if you watch this video again, something, you know, you pick up on something else, because I think that's kind of how the universe works. So I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and like, subscribe, comment, share, all the things, and I will see you guys here next time. Take care. Bye.